Hello everybody, I'm Gary Massa with Massa & Associates and welcome to the Seller Leaseback edition of Tips Tuesday. Today we're going to be evaluating one of the biggest challenges in terms of the transition process from buying and or selling a home. So what happens when you as a buyer agree to lease back or rent the seller the home, let them stay in the home a little bit longer or after closing of escrow, and then when it's time for them to move out and you to move into your new home, they don't move out and you can't get them out because there's an eviction moratorium. Some major problems that are happening in our industry right now, and let's dive all right into that. So basically, one of the solutions for the transition challenge that buyers or sellers are facing because of limited inventory, it's nearly impossible for a seller to find the next home and bridge the sale or the purchase of their home that they're buying to close concurrently on the same day. It at least now takes at least 1, if not 2 days because of money transfers, etc., etc. And a lot of sellers are moving out of state. Just the timing issue is really challenging to pull together whether they're getting into a rental or buying another home. And they're requesting that buyers give them a lease back, many times for free or virtually free, and or more time in the property. And many buyers, because of the competitive situation in the market, are kind of being forced to do it whether they like it or not, just to remain competitive. Some buyers can't do it, just period, but many can, and they're allowing the sellers to do that, and it's part of the negotiation process, which seems like a pretty simple solution, right? If it's possible for both sides. Well, what happens when the buyer doesn't move out? There was a news article that a friend of mine posted about a story in Riverside, and I have a feeling it's happening more than just this one occasion that was put in the news. But basically, family buys a home, they let the sellers rent there for a certain amount of time, and then when it was time for the sellers to move out, they didn't move out. And because there's an eviction moratorium, they could not evict the sellers. And I don't know where it is in the lifespan of that story or court case at this particular time, but eviction laws in California are tough enough as it is. They tend to take time, at least 90 days. Sometimes I've seen cases where the landlord or the owner of the home couldn't evict a person for over a year, depending on how they tie this up in the court system. So eviction is very challenging anyways. But right now, there's an eviction moratorium. So what if the seller gets a free rent back or just some sort of rent back in the home? Then when it's time for them to move out, they can't find a rental property because there's no rental inventory. They can't find a home to buy because there's no inventory, and or they're selling because their financial situation changed and they just don't have the funds to get into a home that they like or just get into a home, period. Are they going to voluntarily move their family out into the cold or become homeless? Probably not. And if there's, if they have any, knowledge of the legal system or have an attorney, they can tie this up and fight for it and stay in the home and keep the actual owners or the buyers of the home out of the house. So again, this is all kind of diving into legal stuff that I can't really give any advice for, but it is a problem and it is happening. And here's what you need to know and how you might be able to protect yourself against it in that situation. So if you're buying a home, and or I guess this isn't really relating to the sellers in as much, but to the buyers, if you're buying a home, a couple of things that you need to be aware of. There's 2 different forms that you would fill out if you were going to give the sellers any other time in the home. Most lenders will not let you, as a buyer, will not let you agree to allowing the seller to stay in the home for more than 60 days unless you were financing this as a non-owner occupied property, meaning it was a investment property. But if you're financing it as an owner occupied property, 60 days is their max, and realistically 59, because you're supposed to be in the property in 60 days, right? So that's a lender requirement, first of all, you need to know. But if you're doing a leaseback or letting the seller stay in the home for less than 30 days, there's a form. And I've seen a lot of agents send over the residential lease after sale, which is a lease. That form is for 30 days or longer, but they're sending over that form for less than 30 days, which is not quite accurate, and I'll explain why. The seller license to remain in possession addendum, seller in possession addendum, is a license to remain in the home. And it specifically states, I'm just going to read it, local rent control or other law regarding tenants' rights may be impacted or may impact buyer and seller's rights and obligation. Okay, so and that's 29 days or less. Okay, you can still charge money, you can still hold back a deposit, etc., but it's still tied to the sale of the home. The residential lease after sale is still tied to the lease to the sale of the home. However, listen to the difference of the language. It says landlord rents to tenant and tenant rents from landlord. Establishing landlord-tenant, or just establishing tenancy, landlord-tenant relationships, which each one of those have their own legal rights, which again, I can't give you legal advice, but something to maybe check with an attorney about what the differences are between a 29-day seller in possession versus 30 days or longer in the language of landlord-tenant rights and the eviction process, and a license to stay within the home, and what eviction process may be, may come along with that as well. So again, two differences of the type of, tenancy or type of time frame you can give the sellers after the sale that may or may not protect you any more or less, but definitely something you should know about. And then secondly, what's the solution? So again, everybody enters into a contract or into agreement with good intentions pretty much most of the time, right? We have to believe everybody starts with good intentions, but situations do change, and that's why we have agreements. But at the end of the day, if the tenant doesn't want to pay and you can't evict them, there's really not very much you can do without going through the legal channels, right? But the solution that we're finding is you can still get a deposit from the seller through this process, right? That will be paid to you from to the buyer through the proceeds of the sale through escrow. So the seller doesn't have to give you that directly. It'll come right through the closing into your possession. So why not make that deposit something notable? What is it? $1,500? Is it $5,000? Is it $10,000? I think it depends on the size of the home, the purchase price, many other things, etc. But again, I think that the buyers need to understand what the seller situation is, where they're going, why, what their motivation is. Do they have a home? Do they have a rental, a job making them be there? What's the motivation pulling them? So when push comes to shove or the time comes, you have a good idea or good reason why they're going to be out of the home. And then secondly, put something on the line that seller is going to want back. If they don't give you any deposit or any holdback, what's motivating them to leave when they, if they do or don't want to, right? So it's not really for, nicks on the walls, repainting, normal landlord stuff, a stain on the carpet. That stuff was probably already there. It's really only for the fact that once they move out, they get all of their money back. Boom, agreement. It's called motivation and leverage. If you have no leverage, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it except go through the legal channels, which will cost you money and time and a whole lot of frustration. So in a market like right now, where buyers are being forced or encouraged to do a lot of crazy things they normally would not do just to remain competitive, be smart, understand exactly what it is that you are agreeing to do and how to protect yourself in that process. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying understand what it is and make sure you do everything you can to protect you. If you have yourself, rather. If you have any other questions on how this might impact you, please ask your agent, ask me, give me a call. I'm happy to explain to this, but your real estate agent should be able to give you this, the right advice and at least explain all the process. You just got to ask and make sure they're giving you the right answers. If you don't get the right answer, please do give me a call. I'd love to hear your comments below. Have you experienced anything like this? Have you had friends who have had challenges that they faced after the sale of the property because the buyers had been kind of forced or put into a situation to do things that they normally wouldn't do? I'd love to hear about it. We just need to keep educating ourselves and seeing what's really going on about there so we can make the right moves to protect ourselves. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.